You know how the drill of horror movies go. It's like always a creepy building. There's like a killer lurking around. There's always a helpless woman. She's like, oh my God, no. And then there's always some kind of like terrifying plot twist. When you think about it, it's the formula that made the movie The Candyman an instant cult favorite when it came out in 1992. It was about like a creepy serial killer who was like haunting the Chicago tenement area. And he was being summoned via the bathroom mirror, which is funny when you think about it. It's not funny. It's just like, how come growing up, like, well, with the Candyman specifically, it was like if you go into the bathroom and you said his name 5 times, like Candyman, Candyman, like he would come through the bathroom mirror. Like, what's her name? Bloody Mary. Remember her? Anyways, what I'm getting at is that, we all did that shit. But what was even more horrifying is that the Candyman, turns out, like mimics a true case that happened in the Chicago projects back in April of 1987. So April 22nd, 1987. So on that day, that's when Ruthie Mae McCoy had dialed 911 to report that someone was coming through, literally through her bathroom medicine cabinet. What? Yeah. So police would often get phone calls from Ruthie Mae's neighborhood, which was on the west side back then. Like, they were always getting phone calls. The crack epidemic had, crime rates were just going through the roof. So April 22nd, 1987. So on that day, that's when Ruthie Mae McCoy had dialed 911 to report that someone was coming through, literally through her bathroom medicine cabinet. What? Yeah. So police would often get phone calls from Ruthie Mae's neighborhood, which was on the west side back then. Like, they were always getting phone calls. The crack epidemic had, crime rates were just going through the roof. And there were tons of different gangs out there who were controlling the drug trade from Chicago's worst public housing projects. Most of the households there were headed by single Black mothers, but Ruthie, she was 52 years old and she lived alone. And she lived on the 11th floor apartment in a complex called Abbott Homes. Abbott was actually a cluster of 7 high-rises in a sprawling mass of housing projects that locals called the Village, or they would just call it the Ville. There was nothing cozy about this area. And there were thousands of people who lived there. And sadly, violence was an everyday occurrence here. So compared to the rest of Chicago, in this area, your chances of being mugged, assaulted, robbed, raped, murdered, or anything, it more than doubled once you set foot in this area called the Village. And in fact, the number of violent crimes alone hit 4,228 in the CHA projects that year. Holy shit, right? Little pocket developments scattered throughout safer middle-class white neighborhoods. But, the big guys in charge, they didn't like that idea. Of course they didn't. So they squashed that real quick. And they're like, hey, let's clump cheap, ginormous eyesores in the bleakest parts of town and give minority applicants no other option. So this choice would later lead to a landmark federal lawsuit that held the CHA accountable for racial segregation and discrimination. We should do a dark history on that. But that's not the point. But Ruthie Mae, she had moved to Abbott after getting flooded out of her basement apartment in a different project area. So she moved into this Abbott area, and it was said she hated it from the get-go, It was rough. There were gangbangers there, and they would roam the halls at all hours. There would be loud music playing. There'd be partying in vacant apartments. And a lot of the vacant apartments were turned into drug dens. I guess break-ins were very common, and CHA was really slow to replace locks. So it's even when you asked for help, you couldn't get help. I know I look absolutely crazy right now. Okay, but I think this might be going somewhere. We're gonna find out. So part of this original village concept meant that there were no through streets around Abbott. I guess this was supposed to create a nice space for kids to like run around and parents to socialize. But at the end of the day, like that pedestrian plaza only made it harder for police to reach the towers and like get to you if you need help. And it also made it easier for people to jump you. Abbott was controlled by a gang called the Paymasters, and any tenant that the Paymasters thought needed like a reminder of who was in charge would get their front door doused with gasoline and then set on fire. Yeah. The charred doors made people think twice before reporting like any crime they happened to witness or like suspect. And people were just like, scared of retaliation. So they wouldn't report anything.